It's the end of the month, which means it's time for me to do a roundup. If you've watched videos on my channel before, or at least this year, you'll know that every month I have been doing a video roundup of the things that I've made in the previous month. That is a really complicated way of explaining that. So I started keeping a physical journal, a notebook, for all the things that I've been making to keep myself accountable, basically, because I have been crafting for a very long time, but I am also quite bad at finishing everything that I start. And that can either take shape in me giving up on something, undoing it, re-balling the yarn and not doing it again, or me starting 3 or 4 things at the same time and forgetting about half of them, putting them away, and then coming across them weeks, months, years later and having no idea what I was doing, and again frogging it, rolling it back up again and not doing anything with it. So to make sure that I do finish everything that I start and to keep myself accountable, I've been keeping a journal. The first book that I started, I've now only very just finished, and I've started on my second book, which is a lot sooner than I thought I would be. So let's have a look at May. So here is book number 1 of 2023. Let's have a look at everything from this month. This is a granny square blanket that I started in March, and it's taken me quite a while to finish it because it is quite big. It was given away on my Instagram to one of my followers. This is one that I made literally in order just to use up a load of yarns that have been sitting around for a while and I've not found it useful, so I wanted to make a nice big blanket. It's gone to a very lovely person and I'm hoping that they're getting good use out of it. Maybe not so much at the moment because it is quite warm over here in the UK. However, once it gets a bit chilly it will become very handy, I'm sure. The next thing is again something that I started previously and finished in May. So I started this scarf in April and I finished it in the middle of May. This again was given away on Instagram to another follower and hopefully again she'll get some use out of it. Again, hopefully they'll get decent use out of it, just not at the moment because it is rather warm. So moving on to May itself. So the first thing that I made was this granny square bag. In April I did make a different one, or a couple actually. I made a couple of different bags of this style, as you can see here. So I made another one. This one is available for purchase on my Etsy shop, so if you like the look of it you can buy it, and it does come with a strap as well, an adjustable strap to go across the body, which I made. The next thing in the book is the crossbody bag strap. I made 5 of these because I had enough of the length of material to do that. The reason I made these myself rather than buying ones that were already made is because the ones that are already made are actually quite expensive and I didn't want to add extra cost onto the price of the bag for anyone buying it. Plus it meant that I could make the strap as long as I wanted to make it rather than being dictated by what's already been made, if that makes sense. Because I am quite chonky myself, I do need a slightly longer strap. So I find it difficult to find adjustable straps that go big enough for my comfort without me having to make alterations to them. I wanted it to be more inclusive for larger people who have a bit of a bigger body to go around with a bag strap, so that you're not wearing your handbag in your armpit, because that is annoying. The next thing I made was another pouch cover or crochet pouch, pencil case, makeup bag, whatever you want to call it, and use this nice little sun dangly for the zipper. And then I made another crossbody granny square handbag thing. I used lots of different yarns for this because this I used a load of sock weight yarns on, so there's a lot of example yarns here on the page. I had an idea for how to do the granny squares at first, but then I changed my mind and just went for a normal sort of granny square. I was trying to make them like solid squares, but I didn't like how they looked or how they came out, so after I'd kind of done one, looked at it, pulled it apart and did it just the classic granny square sort of chunky clusters way, if that makes sense. This is also available on my Etsy store if you do want to buy it, and it comes with a strap as well. The next thing that I made is a knitted pouch. This again is one of those wanting to use up my excess sock yarns because I've got a lot of them. I'm going to keep buying sock yarns, but I'm also going to keep finding ways to use the sock yarns up. So this is basically my idea initially as a dice bag for playing D&D tabletop games and whatnot, but obviously it can be used for whatever. I've made quite a lot of these, and they're all available on my my Etsy. They work up quite quickly and they use up a decent amount of yarn. What I've done as well to make them go a bit quicker while I'm making them is, instead of using one strand of yarn and a small like sock weight type needle, I've used a slightly bigger needle, gone for 5mm and doubled up, so it's like using a double knit yarn rather than a sock weight yarn, so it kind of goes a bit quicker. Then I made another one. And then I made two for an order. I forgot to take photos before I packaged them up. However, the lovely customer took the photos and sent them over to me. So that's one of the photos there. So yes, thank you very much for taking the photos of that if you are watching. Then I made another two pouches. Because they're quite simple and they don't require a lot of thinking on my part. If I'm having a bit of an uninspired moment, I'm not quite sure what to make, this is the kind of thing I can just chuck on the needles and do while I'm having a think about like a bigger thing that I want to make. Another pencil case, makeup bag, pouch, whatever you want to call it. I don't think I've been consistent with how I've named these all the way through, but I know that they're all the same. Just depends how I feel when I'm writing the notes in the book. And then I made another knitted pouch, which I have horrendously spelled there. It looks like it says putch. Then I made this abomination of a purse. I have it here to hand, bear with. So my idea was, and you can probably see it, you can see what my idea was originally, to do 2 hexagons and then have a third one at the bottom, so it makes a nice little sort of pouch, but it just doesn't sit nicely. It doesn't sit right. I don't like how it looks. But I've put it all together and it's going to sit on the shelf of shame until I decide what to do with it. I will quite possibly pick it apart and reattach, like maybe take the bottom one off so it's just flat like that, rather than having a sort of a bit of capacity at the bottom, if that makes sense. I'm not sure, but I'm in no great hurry to do anything with this, so for the moment on the shelf it will stay. I think my idea was sound, my execution not so much, and maybe my lack of understanding of geometry probably played into it a little bit. The next thing that I started and I haven't finished yet is a granny square blanket. This is again to use up yarns that I've got in my collection, because I've got quite a lot of King Cole Riot DK yarns. I figured I'd make a nice big granny square blanket. This will again either be for a giveaway on my Instagram, or it might be a gift for someone, or I might keep it for myself. I haven't decided yet, because we do have quite a lot of blankets in our house already. However, ironically, not an awful lot of ones that I have made. They're mostly ones that we've bought or been given or whatever. So I probably might keep it. But anyway, I'm not going to commit myself to anything until it's finished and I know how I feel about it when it's done. Then I made another knitted dice bag. And you see a pattern emerging here. And another pencil case, makeup pouch, zippy thing, however you want to call it. Then another thing that I started is the next book cover for the next journal, because this one has a cover which is rolled up nice and neat here waiting for it, which I finished a while ago. And my plan is every notebook that I have for the journals, once it's been finished, will go into a knitted cover or a crochet cover, or I might sew one. a cover of some sort to then go on my shelf in posterity. I have learned from the past one, so instead of doing it on 2.75mm needles, which will take forever, I'm doing it on a 5mm and doubling up the sock weight yarn. So it will probably actually take a lot longer because I'm going to prioritise other things over it. But if I sat and knitted it, I could probably finish it today, but it's going to be a keep in the bottom of the basket for when I've got nothing else to do project because it's super easy. Then the next thing I made was another coin purse. Again, this one didn't go too well either. It looks kind of like a pierogi with a clasp on it. I had a different idea and it didn't work out either. It was basically I did one hexagon and it's folded in half, which is kind of why it looks like a pierogi, I suppose. Again, that's gone onto the shelf of doom. Actually, that's gone to a different shelf of doom because I was sat somewhere else when I finished it off. So the next thing that I did is I did a bit of a test swatch for sort of like a lacy knitting pattern because I have an idea for an upcoming project which I haven't started yet, but I have done sort of the groundwork for. I will explain a bit more about that later on, but for the moment I'll just go into this. So basically I wanted to make something with a kind of a lacy-ish pattern, so I had a look online for simple lace patterns that are like 1 row repeats or 2 row repeats, because I have a habit of starting a lacy thing that's a little bit complicated and then losing my place with it. So then when I actually come to pick it up again, I have no idea what I was doing before and I'm probably going to ruin it. So if I do a 1 or 2 row repeat, it means that no matter where I put it down, in theory, when I pick it up, I should get it right. So I tried a couple of different methods and stuck the results in there. So I used method 1, which is this one. It kind of leans a little bit rather than this, which is kind of like a laddery type effect. It's actually not a very good representation on these these swatches, I think, because of the way they've kind of smushed in the book, but never mind. So then I took the method 1 from that page and I had a go at doing it flat and circular, because the thing that I want to make, or had the idea for, needs circular as well as flat knit sections, and I didn't want the circular sections to look different to the flat sections unless you look really close, because if I can make a tube rather than a flat thing and then sew it together, that is always going to be my preference. So I had a bit of a test and those are the photos from those. I didn't waste the yarns because what I did was, it's, as you can see, it's the same yarn both times, at least to start with. I've just frogged it back and rolled it back up to use for something in anger, because the amount that I knitted was too big for me to stick in here. So I basically had the idea of, to make them look similar because they kind of lean, so it ends up looking like a diagonal pattern. I wanted to make sure that the flat and circular would both look like that, and they do. Again, the picture isn't very good. I need to do a better job of this, really, but this is for my own reference. If I was doing this for someone else, I would definitely have a much better visual representation for them. So yeah, that went well, and I know what I want to do with that. Then I made a pencil case and that's the end of that book. So this isn't the end of May. I have started my next book, so I'll put this away and pick up the next one. And here is book 2. So slightly different aesthetically, as you may appreciate, but yeah, this is book number 2. It has got some pages missing from the beginning because, like with most of my notebooks, I start using them for one thing, change my mind and cut the pages out, or I might have needed some like dotted, gridded paper for something. So the first thing that I put in here is a pen holder, which is on this book itself. It's very rudimentary and frankly rubbish. So it performs its function for the moment, but I definitely want to redo it at some point. It's not necessarily something that I want to do right now and has to be done straight away, but I will make a better one or a different I'm not entirely sure. I might sew, I might crochet. This kind of, it doesn't hold the pen as tightly as I'd like, but it's just because this book doesn't have like an outer flap for me to attach the pen to like I did on the previous one, and I don't want to attach it onto the front or back because it will kind of bend the cardboard a bit, and I don't want to do that either. Then the next thing that I started and I haven't finished yet is a triangle shawl. It's a navy colour, and then it's got a secondary colour sort of wrapped around it, but that wrapped around colour changes throughout, so it's like a rainbow, and it's really, really nice. So I'm making sort of a nice loose lacy shawl with that yarn. I am looking forward to using. I might not use it until the autumn or winter because it's getting warmer here, but it'll be finished by the time I want to use it, so that's fine. Then the next thing I made is a pair of socks as a gift for someone. They have been packaged up and sent out in the post already, so hopefully the recipient will get them in the next couple of weeks because they are going abroad. But yes, a nice pair of socks. Took 3 days or thereabouts to do, which is about right actually, because it was 2 socks. Usually I only make 1 at a time. And the next thing I did was a gauge swatch for this lovely yarn that I've got here. It's Charm Lace Weight from Stylecraft in the shade Dragonfly. And this is the yarn I'm going to be using for the thing that I was talking about, and I will explain a little bit more later on. Basically, I just wanted to do some swatches with different sized knitting needles to see what my preferred texture would be. So I've got 4, 5 and 6 mil. Now usually I'd probably go for a 5, but because this is so fine and so light, I really like how light and flowy this feels, because it's going to be a cardigan to wear in the summer, or a bolero. Again, I will explain it more in depth in a bit. But no, I really like this, the way that this looks and feels. I think it suits the yarn really well, especially for my intended use for it. So as I mentioned there, I do have an idea for a project, which I am going to start in the coming weeks. However, I want to make sure I've finished a couple of other things up before I start on that. I will go into more detail on what that is, I promise you. So at the moment I have a granny square blanket, the book cover for the current notebook, and a shawl, all on the go. So I want to try and finish the blanket and the shawl before I start on the next project, mainly because I want to have very little occupying my creative space, if that makes sense. I probably will have a couple of socks on the go in the meantime as well, but those will probably be my take to work and work on in my breaks project rather than working on at home. The 2 things that I need to finish before I start thinking about the new project is the blanket and the shawl. So the blanket is just a simple granny square blanket, which is just using up a load of the same kind of yarn that I've got. As I said, I haven't decided what I'm going to do with it ultimately, but once it's finished, it's done. And I'll be able to decide what I want to do with it at that point. The other thing is the shawl, which is being made out of a mystery yarn. I think it's acrylic. It could be acrylic wool blend, I'm not 100% sure. I was part of a Secret Santa a few years ago online, so the person that was giving me the gift, I don't know them, never met them, haven't spoken to them before or since really. This Secret Santa asks for a bit of information about things that you do, things that you like, hobbies, etc., so that the person buying a gift can get something that you will actually want. And obviously I mentioned that I do yarn-based crafts. So they went to charity shops and they picked up a load of different yarns. Because it's a charity shop, it's most likely someone's passed away and their family don't do yarn crafts, so they had no use for the yarns. But a lot of them had been unwrapped and don't have labels on, had been reballed and whatnot. This is the yarn in question. It's a navy with, it's like a navy colour is like the main colour, and then there's a rainbow variegated yarn incorporated into it. I think, I don't know, you can kind of see it's wrapped around it. And it's really nice. I really like it, and it looks really lovely on the shawl, the part that I've made so far anyway. but I have no idea what the yarn is. I'm hoping that I've got enough to make a shawl for myself. If not, it'll just be a big scarf rather than a shawl. Thankfully, the pattern that I'm using is quite forgiving in that sense. My idea for this new project that I'm going to be going into, it's going to be quite big. I mean, mentally, it's going to be quite big. I've done a lot of the work already to get things started. What I'm going to make basically is a knitted bolero which ties at the front, because I want something to cover my arms, but that doesn't add like too much warmth or bulk. Last year I made this jumper, which was a tester piece basically, and then made a green jumper based off that. The idea was for it to be worn under overdresses, so I've got sleeves, but the trouble with this is because it's double knit yarn and it's sort of solid knit, if that makes sense, it can get a little bit warm, especially now coming into spring and summer, and it is really quite warm in the UK. I don't like being warm because I am bigger. I get warm more easily. So I thought a bolero type thing would be fabulous. I have had a look for patterns online, and the patterns that I found don't go big enough for me. And in order to make those patterns fit my size, I would have to do probably just as much work as it would take to make my own pattern to fit my size. So I basically worked out the sort of the shapes and the construction that I want for the top, and I've taken my measurements so I know how big I need to make everything. And I've got this little note thingy with everything on. It'll be back panel, arms, and then 2 triangles for the front, which will overlap enough that I can tie it up like in front of my chest, under my boobs, wherever it will sit nicely and tie up in the front. My original idea was to use the lacy stitch that I tested and to use a yarn that would complement that. I went yarn shopping in person, which is very rare for me because I usually just buy my yarns online, but I wanted to see the yarns in person, have a feel of them, maybe see if there's like a knitted example of the yarn so I know what it feels like when it's knitted up. Instead, I found a really, really nice yarn, which is the green one from those samples of the different sizes. I found that it's really, really nice. It's sort of subtly variegated, so it's not all one solid colour, but it's not like going from like bright green to bright pink to, you know, different colours. I like how it feels as well, especially with the 6mm needles. So I have that ready to go. The only things I need to do is actually start knitting it and also work out how to do my decreases, because if you have a look at this, I don't know if you can see that very well, the shapes of the pieces go in at the shoulders, and then I've also got this diagonal. So I don't know exactly how I'm going to do the diagonal. Obviously I have an idea. It will either be increase or decrease depending on how I construct it, but it's more how often am I doing those adding or taking away of the stitches to make sure that I get the length that I want. This is why I mean it's going to be quite a big project, because I'm probably going to start things and then have to rethink my idea, start again, do something different. So that's why I want to finish as much as I can before I start that, so that I can use all my grey matter on the bolero rather than on anything else. So it might be June that I start it, it might not be, it might be July before I actually start it, but I'm going to make the best effort that I can to make sure that I get the blanket and the shawl, I don't know why I picked that up, that's not the shawl, the shawl finished before I start that in earnest, because I don't want to impede myself on getting it done right. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for your time and for listening. If you want to find me anywhere else, my link tree is down in the description below, and it has links to the various places where you can find me. Let me know in the comments if you have any tips for how to get the shaping that I want quite easily on my upcoming project, or if you know of any good resources where I might be able to find the help. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.